Hello, welcome back to Living on the Verge. So, at the end of the last episode, I told you there was still one very big part of birthday week left to tell, right? And I also told you that Richard Blais somehow entered the story, which, as I sit here reflecting, is still one of the most delightfully random and perfectly me things that happened all week. And then I left you there. So today, I'm going to keep my promise. And I think the best way to begin is just to take you into the moment when the rest of birthday week finally revealed itself. Because, yes, there was a surprise party, a real one, the kind with curtains and people hiding and a whole room full of faces waiting for you to walk in. Okay, you guys, I had suspicions. I have to be honest, and let's be clear about that. People are often kind of terrible at keeping surprises when they're genuinely looking forward to somebody else's joy. And I'm a very insightful person. Not one person in that room said that it wasn't hard to keep the secret from me. But I digress. Anyway, when you're excited, it's hard. And Ben had practically been vibrating with excitement for days. There had been little leaks and odd moments, and as we got closer, certain things that didn't really quite add up. And so I knew something might be happening. But knowing that something might be happening is not the same thing as walking into a room and seeing your life look back at you. And as I tell you this, I can feel the moment and it makes me emotional all over again. I didn't expect that. Okay, well, you guys, that's what this episode is really about. Although we're absolutely going to talk about the party too, it is about the party. And it's about what happens when you stop managing the moment and you stop taking care of everybody else. I had stopped asking questions and you stop wondering what still needs to be done and you let yourself be celebrated. And to understand why the reveal landed the way it did, I have to admit that the clues had kind of been accumulating for days. So Ben is not built for the quiet containment of exciting information. And that's a really nice way of saying anyone who knows my husband knows secrets, not his strong suit. He had already slipped about Andrew coming. And so there were questions and then a moment of disappointment when Andrew kind of slipped one over on me on Friday when he called to wish me a happy birthday and said that he wasn't going to be able to come. And then there were questions and little logistical moments that didn't make sense for the time. There was a question about money. There were conversations about, who I really enjoyed. And so when I think about it, as I share it with you, I realize that there were a lot of clues. And when Andrew, Ariana, and Gigi showed up at my doorstep, not more than half an hour before it was time for me to get dressed for this dinner, I was really kind of blown away, and that had my mind moving in so many different directions. I remember telling Andrew, it wouldn't be the sweetest thing I've ever done, but I'm I can call and cancel dinner, or maybe you could come with us. And he quickly came up with, no, we're going to go hang out at my brother's house, which was pretty good since normally when he comes in, he does go and hang out with his brother at least one of the nights. And so, gosh, they're really good at this. And so when I think about it, I realize there were people appearing, there were plans that were shifting, odd gaps where nobody seemed especially concerned, like feeding me lunch might be a good idea, which, if you know me, food is always a part of the plan. So when they're telling me to hold off food, that is suspicious all in itself, right? But I was just busy enjoying the moment. And honestly, none of these things all came together until now that I've had time to reflect upon them. And even the switch to Europa and the speakeasy, that was kind of bizarre, but I was really happy because honestly, I much preferred to start my fancy birthday dinner with a nice cocktail as opposed to a heavy red wine. And so I didn't see it as another clue. And I had expected to be dressed up, right? We were going to a fancy dinner with our friends. So nothing individually really proved anything. That, my friends, is the genius and the problem with a surprise. Every clue has a perfectly reasonable explanation until suddenly it does not. I suspected something. I had absolutely no idea the scale of it. And I definitely did not know that an entire room of my life was waiting just a short walk away after I left that speakeasy. Sometimes people spoil surprises because they're careless. But sometimes what looks like carelessness is really excitement with nowhere to go. Ben was practically vibrating because he was not only keeping a secret, but he was also carrying the anticipation of my joy. And once I realized that he was taking so much joy in bringing me happiness, it was so easy to just go with the flow and accept even the little slips as part of the overall gift. So I'm going to take you back before the walk towards the room with the curtains. The evening started at the speakeasy. I thought I was about to finish out this long, beautiful birthday week with Susan and Daniel before we all went to a fancy dinner. And I was feeling a little bad about how much they had celebrated me, and in fact had said something to Ben. And anyway, we're sitting there and we're having a cocktail. I decided to just lean in and enjoy it. What a blessing. I thought, let's just go with it. And, you know, you say thank you and you feel grateful. And so that was my mindset for the entire evening. And we sit down, we get drinks served, and I really did enjoy my cocktail. Although if you ask me the name of it right now, I wouldn't be able to remember it. There were just way too many more memorable things that night. But I will go back and have that cocktail at the speakeasy one more time sometime soon. So anyway, we're sitting there and I had just ordered my second cocktail, and Nancy and Greg pull back the curtain to the entrance at the speakeasy and walk in. Well, it felt noteworthy, like, oh, what a coincidence. And Susan said, "What are you guys doing here?" Feigning surprise. Nicely done, Susan. And I remember thinking, well, this is fun. But Nancy immediately covered, said they were there to meet friends for dinner. And nothing about that seemed impossible or out of the ordinary. It just felt like another sweet birthday surprise that I got to spend a few moments with another couple of our friends before we headed off to this dinner. So eventually I get my second drink, but before I could finish it, Susan was suddenly moving us along because supposedly we had a reservation to make. So we better start making our way toward the car, she says. Somewhere along the way back, Daniel pretended to notice a client of his and insisted that we had to walk over to say hello to this client. So we start walking toward this area with tables and people, and then toward a room off to the left of it. Now, if you've ever been surprised, you know there is a very strange little stretch of time when your brain starts collecting all the clues faster than your heart can catch up. And certainly for me, faster than my eyes could absorb what was going on. So why are we stopping to say hello to a client when I can't even finish my drink because we have to leave for this reservation? And how did you see the client in that room? And why, for one tiny millisecond, am I noticing that the curtains are drawn? I'd seen this room before. It's always bright. And then we were going in and the curtains opened. And everyone shouted, "Surprise!" There was clapping. There were faces everywhere. I saw my mom first, and then my dad, and then one by one, my family, my cousins, my friends, my kids, my grandkids, people from completely different chapters in my life, all suddenly standing in the same room. It was wild, you guys. For a second, I didn't know where to look. It was just this worlds colliding moment. Family, old friends, newer friends, people who know different versions of me, all in one place. First, you recognize one person, and before you can absorb that they are there, you recognize another, and then another, and your mind is trying to understand the logistics. Who knew? Who planned this? How long has all this been going on? What in the world is going on? And that's what I kept saying. What in the world is going on? But your heart is already somewhere else entirely. As everybody's walking up and hugging me, the thought underneath it all was just so simple. They really do love me. You guys, it sounds so childlike when I say it out loud. But then again, maybe the truest thoughts usually are. And I want to talk about why even a beautiful thought like that can feel so vulnerable. Because the first response, of course, was not analysis. It was not, oh my goodness, what a well-coordinated event. It was not, I wonder what the food is. It wasn't even, I knew Ben was up to something. It wasn't. No, the first response came from somewhere much younger and less defended. They really do love me. That thought surprised me almost as much as the room. Of course I know my family loves me. Of course I know I have friends. I had not spent the week believing otherwise. I had a fantastic week. But knowing love exists, but it's one thing to know that love exists, and it's another thing seeing it arranged in front of you. Those two are definitely different experiences. The room turned an invisible truth into something physical. There were bodies, the faces, how beautiful everyone looked, the clothes people had chosen to wear, the schedules everyone had to rearrange, the miles they had driven, the secret they had all carried, little sneakies. Love had taken up space. It had a soundtrack. It had delicious food, beautifully decorated tables, and grandchildren in dress clothes. So I want to talk about why receiving can feel so vulnerable. For me, I find that I'm really comfortable loving people. I know how to plan. I know how to gather. I know how to check whether everyone has what they need. I know how to think ahead. I'm the one who makes the reservation or bring the extra thing or try to keep the conversation moving. For sure, I'm the one who takes the pictures. And I definitely am the one who holds the memory. I know how to give. Receiving is different. Receiving means there's nothing to fix. There's nothing to earn. There's nothing to improve before you're allowed to enjoy it. There's nothing to do, you guys. You just have to stand there while people show you what you mean to them. And that can be surprisingly uncomfortable. For me, it can even start to feel like, enough already, this is too much. I almost feel unworthy of being the center of that much care for such an extended period of time. In fact, the morning after my actual birthday, I wrote in my journal, "I'm still here, LOL." And that, when I think about it, is just a real me way to greet 60. Part gratitude, part humor, and part, well, look at that. I also wrote that all the attention was starting to make me a little embarrassed. Even when Ben wished me a happy birthday again on Sunday morning, I kind of giggled and I was happy and I was grateful. But I didn't know what to do with all of that care. I think a lot of women understand what I'm talking about when I say this. We can receive a compliment and we immediately soften it. If we're thanked, we immediately start to explain why it was no big deal. We can be celebrated and start worrying whether everyone else is having a good time. Do you find yourself doing that? We can turn somebody else's gift into another job for ourselves if we're not careful. But this party, it did not need me to run it. It had already been imagined. People had already made plans. They had rearranged their time. They had kept secrets, some more successfully than others. They had gathered because they wanted to be there. And my job was to receive it. And the funny thing is, a party this big and this special becomes a blur almost immediately. But I do not want to blur past the party itself because it was a pretty special event. First of all, everyone looked beautiful. People had dressed up, all for me, which is still wild to say out loud. There was music by Gina, this fantastic acoustic guitarist, and when I tell you about the food, it is a tapas restaurant, and I would venture to say we were served nearly every item on that menu. There were course after course after course, and everything was done with care. Everything was delicious. Thank you to the kitchen staff and to Chef for curating such an amazing birthday menu for me. The moments were just fantastic. Food being passed along, people walking from table to table, conversation everywhere. People were coming up and hugging me. Someone wanted pictures. Someone else would be telling me how the surprise came together. I'd be laughing one second and crying the next, and then laughing again. And Ben, oh my dear sweet Ben, he kept making sure another vodka soda found my way into its hand after I'd enjoyed a little bit of wine with dinner. And that lasted for the remainder of the evening. Thank you, honey. And that story comes back a little bit later. But for now, I want to talk about the room itself, because the room itself deserved to be taken in. Everyone looked beautiful. They had dressed up. Ethan was wearing this gorgeous aqua shirt. Zeke had on a suit. Ezra was wearing suspenders and a bow tie. And Bailey was even in a dress for her nana. Okay, Marnie, girl, she looked gorgeous. I have known my sister-in-law for decades, and I had never seen her look more beautiful than maybe on her wedding day. And she did that for me. Those details, they mattered. And they hit me because they show intention before anyone even said a word, before anyone even showed up that day. Now, a little note again about the food. This wasn't a room where someone had thrown a few things on the table and hoped for the best. The servers were professional, immaculate. The food was beautiful. The plating was ridiculous, as per usual with Bolero. The wine had been lovingly considered by my husband, along with a very generous offering from our friends who, guess what? That was why Susan was at Bolero on Tuesday. She was ordering wine for my party and did not expect me to be sitting there because she had been keeping very close tabs on me, and she knew I was supposed to be at Dofo Winery that day. So that closes another loop. At one point in the evening, Joseph, the sommelier at the restaurant, sent over a beautiful, expensive bottle of wine. That was very, very sweet. Thank you, Joseph. And the managers came out to wish me a happy birthday. The staff was amazing, especially, of course, my Marlene. Music, food, two of the clearest pathways to my heart, and they were all especially curated and built into this evening just for me. There were so many people I wanted to look at and hug. My mom, my dad, my cousin, and then my boys started coming up to me one by one. Corey, Chance, Matthew, Andrew, my brother, my sister, Lana, Jim, Greg, Nancy, Terry, just family, friends, my grandchildren. Oh my gosh, I could not process one face before another pulled my attention. It was both incredibly joyful and disorienting. And I'm sure I said awkward things, because what do you say when your whole life just kind of appears at you from behind curtains? I was thrown off, you guys. The party kept moving even when I couldn't fully keep up. Food kept coming in, different courses were served, the music was playing, the kids were running around and dancing. My baby Ezra started to get tossed from one family member's arms to another because everybody wanted their moment with him. There were conversations happening in every direction. And like I said, people were explaining little pieces of the secret. Some people would be like, let's not forget to take a picture. Somebody would refill my wine glass. I was trying to absorb the room, but also live inside of it. And that tension between noticing and participating is part of why the memories tend to come back in flashes instead of in a tidy sequence of how the evening unfolded. That and the wine and vodka sodas, if I'm being completely honest. But even inside of all of that movement, certain moments, they stopped me in my tracks. They didn't slow down. They stopped me. Ethan, my oldest grandson, asked me to dance. And honestly, my heart, that one stays. I knew in the moment while it was happening how special it was. In a room full of people, my grandson asked me to dance at my 60th birthday party. I don't need to make the moment mean any more than it already does. It was a first that can never be replicated. It became precious while it was still happening. I remember thinking, lean in and closing my eyes and fighting back tears. And you guys, as a bonus, somebody captured it. As I'm getting pictures sent to me from the night of the party, I have some pretty special pictures of that moment. Ethan asking me to dance was one of those moments when I was just fully there. I wasn't scanning the room. I wasn't wondering if anyone needed anything. Honestly, I didn't do much of that all night. They really had everything handled. My grandson wanted to dance with his nana. And in that instant, I just knew. Remember this. His hand, his head on my chest, the music, the fact that he chose me at that moment in a room full of activity. It all felt simple and yet enormous at the same time. And that's what the best memories do, you guys. They do not always announce themselves as, hey, I'm about to be an important moment in your life. Sometimes they are just a child asking you to dance. And your heart recognizes the value and the magnitude before your mind even has the language for it. And that somebody captured it feels kind of like a little extra mercy. I have the live memory, but I also have proof that that moment did happen. And years from now, I'll be able to look at it and remember not only what happened, but how it felt to know while it was happening that this was one of the little pieces of that night that I wanted to keep. And then there was Ben, my precious, precious Ben. Ben had been so visibly delighted by this entire celebration. And I think his excitement had been part of what made him trying to keep this surprise difficult. So once it was finally revealed, once I stepped through those doors and the hugs settled down and the drinks were flowing, he was just so done and so happy to be done carrying the secret and so thrilled to be able to enjoy what he had helped create. And I could see the pride, and I was so proud of him. When we talked about it the night afterward, he realized he had missed different pieces of the evening because he had just been moving around through the room, checking things and making sure that everything happened. And that's just Ben too. Even when the celebration is over, part of him is still trying to make sure everything worked. And what I remember most is not whether everything happened in any particular order or whether things were perfect, but it's how happy everyone was to see me happy, and how happy Ben was to finally stand inside the thing that he had helped build. You guys, there's something so super tender about realizing that the person who planned this experience may not fully experience it the way you do. I mean, my gosh, Matthew, I can't even imagine how much he had been carrying on his shoulders. And everyone was very sure to make sure to let me know that Matthew was the brainchild behind the magnitude of the evening. But for their sacrifice and all the planning and all the stress and all the making sure all of the loopholes were closed before the big reveal, they'd been carrying a secret. Ben had been carrying the secret. And when I think about it in retrospect, that's huge. All the small things, the timing, the making sure he had everything there, the waiting for the reveal. But once I knew, his job changed. He didn't stop instantly being the person who made it happen, but he realized later how much he had missed moving through it. And I understood that completely, because that's exactly what can happen when you're the one producing the memory. You make sure everyone else gets the picture, and sometimes you're barely in it. You watch the clock. You make sure that you're solving every little problem. You check on the next thing. And that realization made his happiness even more meaningful to me. He wasn't looking for a flawless event review. He was just happy that I was happy. Everyone was. That was the measure of the night. Not whether I greeted every person in the right order or whether Ben saw every second that happened. The joy had reached the person it was intended for, and everybody got to share in that. That is the gift inside the gift. And then, you guys, there was a tribute video. It turns out everyone had been submitting photos, and you guys, I gotta tell you, there's something almost surreal about watching pieces of your life on a screen while many of the people in those memories are sitting in the room with you. The video was not showing me a life that was over. It was showing me a life that was still happening. People I love were not only images from another time, they were beside me, watching it with me. That is when a milestone gets to stop being about a number. 60 was not a verdict. It wasn't a closing argument. It was just a chance for a new vantage point. For a few moments, I could see the years behind me and the love all around me at the same time. And boy, was I a teary mess. The tribute video deepened that feeling because it had required participation too, right? People had submitted photographs from different times, different versions of my life. Some pictures held people who were sitting right there. And some carried me back to places and ages that I don't visit every day. But together, they made a kind of visual timeline. Not a perfect biography, but a collection of, let's call it evidence. And watching it in that room was different from scrolling through pictures alone. Every image had witnesses. Somebody remembered what happened before the picture. Somebody knew what came after. Somebody in that room had been part of the story, and somebody else was meeting the version of me that was in that photo for the very first time. And that is what I mean by worlds colliding. My life is not one continuous group of people. Nobody's is, who have all known each other forever. That's not a thing. It is chapters, family, friends, newer relationships that somehow feel old. People who knew me when my children were young. People who now know me as Nana. People who know me through wine and travel, church, the podcast, ordinary life. For one evening, those chapters were not separate. They were all watching that same screen together. And yes, as promised, Richard Blais really did enter the story. My son Corey arranged a personal cameo for me. The day before the party on Friday, all of a sudden, out of the blue, I get a text from him, and attached to it is this cameo from none other than Richard freaking Blais. You know who he is. If you know, you know. And I will play it for you soon, but that's something for another time. For now, let me just tell you about it. It was specific. Food and music, you guys, have always been paramount in my life. And Corey knew exactly how much his love of food and that connection we shared through food would mean to me in this moment. He nailed it. It was not a generic birthday gesture somebody could have chosen for anybody. It was Corey saying, I know what you watch. I know what makes you laugh. I know what you love. And I know what would make you feel like maybe you did something right. That is what made it land. It was priceless. Sometimes being loved is being helped. Sometimes being loved is being protected. And sometimes being loved is your son knowing exactly which celebrity chef would make you lose your ever-loving mind on your 60th birthday. I was laughing and crying all at once as it was hitting me what was actually happening. And when I think about it now, I realize that it kind of parallels that odd irreconciliation of emotions that happens when you're taken by surprise. It was very similar to that discombobulation of Saturday. The cameo was funny and exciting and amazing, but underneath the surprise, there was a quieter message. We know you. Being known, when somebody knows you, it's one of the deepest forms of being celebrated. Corey gave me the gift itself, but he also gave me the gift of recognizing that food and music, the things that I have poured into our family, they stuck. And they became part of him too. That connection through food is not trivial in our family. Food has been celebration, comfort, travel, curiosity, conversation, memories for sure. And music has worked the same way. Those things have been woven through our house and through our relationships and through all of our family celebrations for years. So when Corey chose that gift, it felt like evidence that what mattered to me had become part of what matters to him. You guys, parents spend years wondering what's landing. You cook, you host, you drive, you repeat. You create traditions, Maybe you try to expose your kids to things that you love. And you rarely, if ever, get a clean little report that says, yes, this part stayed. And then one birthday, your grown son chooses a gift that could only have come from knowing you deeply. And for a moment, you get that report. That was part of why I was laughing and crying at the same time. It makes me emotional all over again. Jeez Louise. Okay. You guys, it was Richard Blais, yes. And that alone was hilarious and thrilling. But it was also Corey saying, without needing to spell it out, I know you, Mom. And I know what would make this moment yours. And that was the real gift inside the cameo. Holy moly. So the next morning, I was just tired. I was spent, ready to rest. And I had just slept like a rock. I was just so full of love, of food, of emotion, of gratitude. I had reached that place where the body says, that was wonderful, and now we are done. But emotionally, I was overflowing, and clearly, I still am. That next morning was quiet in the way mornings after big events usually are, you know. All the noise, the decoration, it's all behind you. But throughout the day and in the days to follow, your mind keeps replaying little flashes. The face you didn't expect, something somebody said, Ethan reaching for me to dance, my mom being there, my parents in the room, Ben looking relieved and proud, the moment with the video moving across the screen. Physically, I was tired. Emotionally, I was wide awake. I kept thinking about being loved and remembered in such a beautiful way. Not just loved in theory, remembered, considered, planned for. People had paid attention to who I am and built a night out of those details. And that distinction matters. Love can be something we know intellectually, but being remembered makes it tangible. Somebody remembered having a nice dinner here would be delightful to Mom. Somebody remembered we have to have music. Somebody collected photos. Somebody coordinated the family. Somebody decided everyone should get dressed up and that I would love that. Somebody made sure we had enough wine. Somebody watched the clock, kept the secret, dressed the grandbabies, got everyone into the room, and waited behind those curtains. No wonder my cup felt like it was running over. It was not one gesture. It was dozens of acts of attention stacked all together until I could finally get to see them. And I wrote something I don't want to rush past. If I ever wondered how much I matter, I don't anymore. That is a big sentence. Not because I walked into the week believing nobody loved me. I know I am loved. I have a husband, children, grandchildren, parents, family, and friends who show me that in all kinds of ways. But there's a difference between knowing something intellectually and having it made visible to you all at once. There's a difference between thinking, yes, these people all care about me, and then watching them come through the curtains of your life from every direction. They gave their time, they coordinated, Joseph the sommelier sent over wine. Managers came out to wish me a happy birthday. They showed up. The staff was amazing, especially Marlene. And Gina, guitar perfection. They stood in the room together and waited for me. The party answered a question I may not even have realized that I was asking. Do I matter? Yes. Not because I produced something, not because I made the plan, not because I was useful that day, but because I am theirs and they are mine. And the answer did not arrive in one dramatic spoken sentence into a microphone. It arrived through accumulation. My parents were there. My children were there. My grandchildren were there, all dressed up. My cousin, my friends, my sister came, my brother came. People from the old chapters and people from the newer chapters had made the same decision. Show up. And that matters to me because 60 can kind of tempt you into taking inventory. You look at all the years behind you. You think about the body changing, the children growing up, the roles are shifting, the plans that worked, the ones that didn't. And you quietly start asking whether the most important parts are behind you, even if you never really say that question out loud. But I've had some time to think. And that room gave me another way to look at it. When you think it's all behind you, maybe you just need to turn around and look the other way. There was my life, not behind me, but around me. There were relationships still growing, grandchildren still making memories with me, friendships that are still deepening, work still unfolding, a podcast that's still giving me a place to tell the truth, and a husband who had apparently been running a covert operation right under my nose. 60 was definitely not, as it turns out, a closing argument. In fact, it was proof of continuation. I was not looking at the remains of a life I had already lived. I'm looking at the people with who I am still living it. And so for me, I want to tell you what it really means to let yourself be celebrated. I've been thinking about the title of the episode. What happens when you let yourself be celebrated? First, you may feel embarrassed or say something awkward like, "What in the world is happening?" 32 times. You may cover your mouth and laugh or want to make an awkward joke. You may start scanning the room trying to find something to do. Then, if you stay with it, just stay with it. Something softer happens. You begin to notice the effort without calculating the cost. You notice the people without worrying whether you've greeted everyone perfectly. You stop evaluating whether the celebration is too much and start accepting that the love is real. You guys, as it turns out, letting yourself be celebrated is not vanity. It is participation. The people who love you, they're trying to give you an experience. And so receiving it fully is one way of loving them back. That doesn't mean you perform gratitude perfectly. It doesn't mean you never get overwhelmed. And it doesn't mean every relationship in the room is simple or every moment in your life has been easy. It means you allow the goodness to be true while it's happening. You don't have to shrink the moment to prove you are humble. You do not have to interrupt the love with the list of all the ways you are imperfect. You can just say, "This is beautiful. Thank you. I receive it." And I'm saying that as somebody who genuinely enjoys creating experiences for other people. I like the details. I like thinking ahead. I like knowing the food is right and what is going to be done and the table looks beautiful and that everybody has everything they need. That is not what I consider a flaw or something I need to erase. No, friends. It is one of the ways I love people. But there is a difference between being capable and believing it's you who must always be the capable one. There is a difference between enjoying control and being unable to relax when someone else holds the plan. At the party, I had no choice but to confront that difference. I had no idea. I did not choose the guest list. I did not approve the room. I did not check the timing. I did not know what food had been ordered, who had been invited, what song was next, or whether something got missed or every detail was included. And guess what? Everything was beautiful. Not perfect because somebody met every invisible standard that I may have invented in my quest, but beautiful because it had been made with love. That is the part that I want to carry forward. I do. It's important to me to remember that I can let other people take charge and it will be okay. More than okay, actually. Sometimes the surprise is that they know how to love you in ways you never would have planned for yourself. And so I want to close today with a question. I want to ask you something. When people love you, do you let it land? When somebody compliments you, can you say thank you without immediately arguing with them or explaining it away or returning a compliment? When someone plans something for you, can you participate without taking over? When the people in your life show you that you matter, do you absorb it? Or do you move so quickly to the next responsibility that the evidence never gets all the way in? Now, listen, you may never have a room full of people waiting behind curtains. But my friends, that's not the measure. Your version may be a phone call. It may be flowers carried out of the car by your grandbabies. It may be a meal your husband makes you while you rest on the couch. It may be a friend that just remembers one small thing you said months ago. It may be somebody asking you to dance. Celebration, it's not always loud, but it does ask something of us. It asks us to notice. When I woke up the morning after the surprise, I wrote, "My cup runneth over for sure." And that is still the truest ending. My 60th birthday was full of beautiful things. The wine country day, the spa, lunches and conversations, time with the grandbabies, Ben making lobster, the cameo, the surprise, the dancing, the video, the room. But the biggest gift was not the party. It was the idea that people came together to celebrate me. Me. It was understanding that an entire room had been built out of relationships, some old, some newer, some family, some chosen. And for one night, I could see them all at once. I could see that I matter. I could see that I am known. I could see that I am loved. And at 60, I'm learning that receiving that love is not something I have to earn. It just has to be enjoyed, absorbed, appreciated, and remembered. My cup runneth over. And this is where I want to be careful, because I do not want the lesson to become wait until someone throws you a huge party before you believe you matter. That would miss the point entirely. The party was one spectacular piece of evidence, but the evidence had been arriving all week, and really all my life, in smaller forms. It was Ben making lobster. It was the grandbabies carrying flowers when they showed up for lunch. It was lunches that lasted longer than we expected because nobody was in a hurry to leave. It was friends remembering what I like, or my sons paying attention, people making time. The birthday cards sitting on the mantle after everybody went home and the celebrations were long over. The large celebration made the love visible all at once, but it did not create the love. It gathered the love that was already there. And several days later, I took those cards down from the mantle to put them away. And instead of just stacking them and moving on like we normally do, I took a few minutes and I sat down and I read them again. And just like that, I was back in the morning when I first opened them. The gratitude, love, appreciation, it all came rushing back. I got teary-eyed all over again. And you guys, that small moment mattered because it showed me that receiving is not a one-time performance. Sometimes you have to receive the gift again. You have to slow down long enough to let those words reach you that second time. And this time, I'm going to let it. Thank you for spending birthday week with me. If this episode made you think of someone who needs to let the love land, send it to them. And until then, keep paying attention to real life, the fun parts, the messy parts, and what they are trying to teach us. And I will be right here until next time, living on the verge.